So, hello everyone, welcome to our webinar today where we're going to talk all about our iconic world cruises, our epic grand tours, and then we're going to touch upon some of our longer duration cruises as well. But before I get started, I should introduce myself if you're new to our webinars. My name is Steph Adams and I'm the Training and Engagement Manager at P&O Cruises. And today, I am lucky enough to be joined by our loyalty and onboard sales manager, Richard Starr. And you have been lucky enough to live on board for over 12 years and you've done many of these types of cruises. He's always letting us know that he's been around the world many times. So I've roped him in to our webinar today and he's going to share all of his experience with us. But thank you for joining us. He knows when I go to his desk, I'm roping him in for something.
Always happy to help you, Steph.
But tell our lovely travel agents who you are, tease us with the cruises that you've been lucky enough to experience, and what was it like living on board?
So my career at sea started actually at the early age of 1 year old when my nan and granddad took us on a family holiday on board the much loved Canberra, and people still talk about the Canberra. And having cruised with P&O over the years, it inspired me to want to then work at sea. So finishing university, I then went and joined my first ship in 2009, and I have since been at sea for over 12, even 14 years now, and I've sailed on board all of our P&O ships, also on Cunard as well. I've completed 5 world cruises, which even
not jealous
saying that out loud is, I'm so grateful and lucky to have experienced that. And I did Aurora's 2023 world cruise. Grand tour, sorry. So yeah, I've got a lot of experience on board, having worked on board, sailed on all of our ships. And what I think is amazing about working on board is you live and breathe the product. You are in the product daily. You get to meet our guests and see that experience of that holiday happiness really coming to life. The crew become your family. And what we're going to be talking about, we go around the world and we experience the delivery of what our product is live in real form, but we're also sailing the world to some of the most iconic and special destinations around the world that we sail to.
Yeah, amazing. And you of course look after our most loyal guests.
I do,
and anybody that wants to rebook when they're on board. So we know there's so many of those guests that would like to do that. So is it going to be inspiring or what? So what are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to talk all about the itineraries and the destinations that we go to on these incredible cruises. We're going to explain why our guests choose to go on these iconic world cruises. And we are going to delve deeper into Richard's world and get him just to explain why these holidays are so special and why you as travel agents should be promoting these cruises. Now, do interact with us on the chat function. Use the reactions if you like or see anything. And if you do want to play along with some quiz questions, you can check out the polls and quizzes section at the bottom of the screen and play along. When you hear the right answer, click the answer. We've got shine points up for grabs, so give it a go. But I'm going to start sharing my screen and let's get us dreaming of going round the world, shall we? So I already can't wait. So let's get going. Let's first talk about our world cruises, as this is quite frankly more than a holiday. It's an epic travel experience and your customers are going to be able to experience the farthest reaches, unique cultures and world wonders that they've always dreamed of. And that is why our guests choose to go on these holidays. But why is the world cruise so special?
I think you've already answered that, Steph, by saying it's iconic.
Yeah.
Like, you are going around the world and nothing beats, and I've experienced it, with the guests on board, standing on the promenade deck or the open decks that day in Southampton when you get on board. And the ship always sets sails to fireworks. They make a big party about that moment of you pulling away from Southampton and you're not coming back for, in the past 99 nights, and obviously we're going up to 106 nights world cruises, you are not coming back until you have circumnavigated the world. And in front of you are all the most amazing and iconic ports of call that you maybe have dreamed of going to, or equally going back to and experiencing maybe something different. And like I said earlier, the crew become your family. The guests are on board for so long that they also become each other's family and they share these most amazing experiences together. And you tick off these bucket list destinations. And it's also what you do in the port. So, yes, you're in Sydney, but what do you do in the ports? You tick off moments that you've planned or dreamed of for so long, in the style of one of our ships. All your food, all your entertainment, your accommodations, all included. And it is a once in a lifetime, or for some of our guests, they do them every year.
Yeah.
So I just think setting sail to fireworks, cements that this iconic world cruise is about to start, and every day is something to look forward to, whether it's that balance of sea days versus the port days, or those overnights where you can really get under the skin of a destination.
Love that. And it is that bonding experience as well, isn't it? When you've experienced something with someone that's just so iconic, it is bringing our guests together. And I imagine the feeling on board is something quite special that you won't replicate.
And like you say, you are experiencing these things, so people share birthdays together.
Yeah.
And if there's an iconic sail away from Sydney and everyone's on the open deck watching it, you are experiencing this world cruise with so many other people. And that's why a lot of our solo guests really like the world cruise or the longer durations, because they make their own friendships and family with being so close to these other people that they're not doing it alone.
No.
They're going around the world with, best friends and repeat and do it again and again and again. I know guests that have formed friendships and now do a world cruise together every year.
Yeah, that's incredible. A shared goal to get to that world cruise. Now, look, we've got 2 world cruises on sale now for 2026 and 2027, and they are on our Indulgent Explorer, which is our exclusively for adult ship, Arcadia, and you can just see a couple of images here on the screen. But why is Arcadia so perfect for that world cruise?
I think, even just referring to her as our Indulgent Explorer, she's a very indulgent ship. She explores our longer duration destinations, obviously doing the wild cruise. She has recently had her refit, so a lot of the public spaces have been redressed, reupholstered, added textures and colours and fabrics. So it's really brought her back to life. She's a very special ship to us in the fleet. She's the only ship that we do that sets sail around the world. So she's almost like, representing P&O Cruises at every port that she goes to. She's small enough for it to be very intimate.
Yes.
So you do have that, one crew member to every 2 guests, so very small ratio of guests and crew. Very, lots of public spaces, the bars, the lounges, the specialty restaurants. There's obviously the pool that's covered, so you can use that all the time. The amazing theatre, West End style shows every night. I just think she's so intimate that you can really get lost in the ship if you want to be alone, but you can equally be around other people and explore the world together. And yeah, we love Arcadia.
We love it. You've got the retractable pool there as well, as you are setting sail from Southampton, leaving the winter behind. Palladium style theatre there, the crow's nest. And she does have a lot of artwork on board as well, doesn't she? Like thousands of pieces of art.
Yeah.
So for art lovers, it's really key to have a look around.
And also, because of her size, she's able to go to all these ports of call that our bigger ships just can't go to.
Yeah.
Even the Panama Canal, yes, there's, they've made changes for bigger ships to go, but Arcadia is perfect for sailing the world and going into those lesser known ports that our other ships just can't get to.
No.
It's almost like a royal arrival when we turn up, because some of these places that we go to don't often see ships. It might be once a year on a world cruise. So the welcome is so warm.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're so iconic, aren't we, with our British flag emblazoned on the front of our ship. So they know we are coming. So what an incredible ship. So now let's have a look at our 2026 itinerary. And you can just see here, absolutely incredible to be able to leave Southampton and depart on the 6th of January. So 6th of January 2026, and this is a 100-night cruise, and this returns to Southampton on the 15th of April. So you truly have escaped the winter on our world cruise. Now, this eastern circumnavigation visits 29 unique ports, as well as a full transit of the Panama Canal, which Richard said is incredibly iconic. And then we've got overnight stays in Cape Town, Sydney, Honolulu, and San Francisco. And we've got those overnight stays so our guests can really immerse themselves in those destinations. You might have had a whistle-stop tour, but you can see what a destination is like once the sun goes down. And Look at this. The world truly is covered. Now, Richard is going off on our 2026 itinerary. So close your eyes, Richard, because can you imagine? Close your eyes. You're going to leave Southampton. You're going to head to Portugal, visiting Lisbon and Madeira before Tenerife and the Cape Verde Islands. Arcadia then heads to Senegal and Namibia before spending 2 full days in Cape Town. Guests then head to Port Elizabeth, where we will be heading to Reunion and Mauritius before they arrive in Australia. Guests will be able to visit Fremantle for tours to Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, and then 2 full days to explore in Sydney. And we'll hear where Richard's going to go in Sydney in a second, before he'll head on to New Zealand. Guests will visit Dunedin, Wellington, Napier, Auckland, and Tauranga before heading to Fiji, Hawaii, and then onwards to San Francisco for a couple of days. The last leg sees guests visit LA, Manzanillo in Mexico before transiting that Panama Canal, heading for some Caribbean sunshine in Curacao and Barbados, and then back to Southampton via the Azores. I'm out of breath and I had to read that because what an incredible itinerary. Can you see yourself on that world cruise? Have you got customers that you thinking will want to go on these? Because I can't wait. But what are those ports like? Tell me which ports are most special to you and where you've made the best memories.
Yeah, you've actually given me like goosebumps just like reading out the itinerary, because when you read it out like that and you picture it in your mind, especially when you're speaking to your guests that may be considering booking, it is the world cruise, and you do go across to some amazing ports, of course. So just two of the ones that you've mentioned there. I just want to highlight Cape Town. So I've done Cape Town before, but nothing beats the ship sailing into Cape Town and you seeing Table Mountain for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's always, you know, how is it going to be? Is it going to be covered with clouds? Is it going to have like almost like a tablecloth of clouds over the top? Or are you going to see it in all of its glory? And I think when you are on board in the open decks and you sail towards it and people see it for the first time, it's a moment that you remember, because you are, you know, the furthest point of Africa, you know, South Africa, and you're experiencing something that you may never have seen before. And there's so much to do there. So, you know, obviously Cape Town falls at the start of the world cruise. So, you know, what iconic place to start. But there's so much to see, like the V&A waterfront, which is so special and lovely for people to explore. Boulders Beach to see the penguins, which, you know, is a fabulous day, you know, exploring, you know, some of the natural beauty of Cape Town and seeing the wildlife. Cape Point is always another place where people like to go because it's where the two oceans meet, so the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. So you can see where two oceans meet at that southernmost part of you know, South Africa. So it's really special to, you know, see another continent that you maybe have never been to before. And one tour that I just would like to highlight there is Robben Island. So obviously it's a very historical landmark known for the housing of the political prisoners, so obviously made famous by Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one of the trips that I would definitely recommend people go to if they've not been to Cape Town. Obviously you can organise that through the ship, but just a stunning sail in, sail out, and also you have that overnight. And then I also want to talk about Sydney. So again, Sydney is iconic, but nothing beats, again, sailing to the other side of the world, sailing.
I can't imagine it.
Yeah, like sailing to Australia. You know, we always have this vision of it's so far, but when you just wake up there one day.
So you left Southampton.
You left Southampton and then you wake up and you're in Sydney. But again, everyone gets up. We usually have a very early arrival, and most of the crew and guests are on the open decks. As you turn that corner and you see the Opera House to the left and the iconic Harbour Bridge to the right for the first time, or maybe the 10th time, and you're seeing two iconic landmarks in real life. And it's still very dusky, so the lights are on, the city comes to life, you're there overnight, so you can see a show, you can climb the bridge, but then you also have that sail out, and then you have more of Australia to explore.
Yeah, amazing. And I think in iconic destinations like this, it doesn't matter how many times you see it.
No, it doesn't.
You just, it's still mesmerising. There's always something new to see. So absolutely incredible. So that's our 2026 world cruise. And I think you can see from the map there just how incredible that will be. If guests need a bit more time, then we've got another alternative, which is our 2027 World Cruise, and we'll see if we can get Richard on that one. And again, she will depart on the 6th of January. But this time for 2027, we have extended that duration. So it's actually 106 nights. So she will return to Southampton on the 23rd of April. Again, visiting 29 different ports with that full transit of the Panama Canal, but overnight stays in San Francisco, Sydney, Hong Kong, Singapore, Port Elizabeth, and Cape Town too. And this incredible itinerary includes places like Port Louis in Mauritius, Walvis Bay in Namibia, and then Kona in Hawaii, where we've not visited since 2007. So it's nice to think about the ports that we've not visited, even though we say we've got the world covered. When I read the itinerary, you can see on the map here, slightly different itinerary, different way round as well. Guests can either go and see these iconic ports for the one time, or they can go back to the iconic ports, but they're mixed in with a great blend of other itineraries. So get this, if Richard is lucky enough to get on the 2027 World Cruise, they're going to head to Curacao and Barbados in the Caribbean via Madeira, through that Panama Canal towards Mexico and San Francisco for 2 full days. She then heads down to Kona and Honolulu in Hawaii before Apia, which is a Samoan island. Going to go to Fiji and Vanuatu before arriving in Australia. Guests then get the 2 full days to explore Sydney before heading to Brisbane, Cairns, Papua New Guinea and Manila in the Philippines, and then 2 full days in Hong Kong. She heads to Singapore, Port Kelang for Kuala Lumpur, Penang in Malaysia, Colombo in Sri Lanka, Mauritius, Reunion, and then on to South Africa. Guests will visit Durban, Port Elizabeth, Cape Town, Walvis Bay before heading back to Southampton via St Vincent in the Cape Verde Islands and Tenerife too. And it does leave me breathless. What an epic adventure. And, you know, some guests are doing this as a lifestyle choice. So what a brilliant choice to be able to make. But any other ports in there you'd like to pull out? We've talked about Cape Town, we've talked about Sydney, but where else have you made incredible memories?
Yeah, even just reading out that list, so Colombo in Sri Lanka, I actually went to like an elephant, like almost orphanage where they were being rehabilitated, where they may have been, used in shows or things like that. So they were taken out of those environments and then being able to like be rehabilitated and live freely again.
Wow.
And as guests we were able to go and contribute to that conservation of keeping the area growing and thriving, but also the wildlife, making sure that they were being protected, and that was also organized through the ship. But I also want to talk about San Fran because it's another iconic port, and obviously we need to talk about the Golden Gate Bridge. And I think I remember you saying, Steph, that you've actually cycled over the Golden Gate Bridge.
I did. It was amazing. I did it on my honeymoon, and it was just a brilliant way to go and see San Francisco. You get to Tiburon, Sausalito, and then we got the ferry back to the main town. So it was amazing. And Alcatraz is an incredible experience.
I think when I go next year on the Wild Cruise, I'm going to do. I have gone over the Golden Gate Bridge by the open top bus.
Yes.
See a lot of the city, but I think I'm going to walk over it or cycle over it.
Definitely.
And stop and just have a moment to really take in like where we are, because you can see the ship from the bridge as well.
Yeah.
But also, like you say, Alcatraz, which is an amazing place to see. It's part of the history of the US. Pier 39 and Fisherman's Wharf, where you can see the sea lions.
Oh, they were so funny.
So
I could have stood there all day
watching them. Lombard Street, which people might not familiarise the name, but when you see it, the zigzag street where people go and have their photo and watch all the cars coming down. And also a little quirky one, I actually went to Mrs. Doubtfire's house.
Oh, brilliant. I knew you'd do that.
So if you're a Mrs. Doubtfire fan, you can actually go to the house where it was filmed. I don't think the people that live there now like it, but I think they're used to the tourists stopping by and get a photo outside of Mrs. Doubtfire's house. But I also want to talk about Hong Kong as well, which is another amazing port that we go to. Victoria Harbour Light Show, Ocean Park, where you you can see the pandas, the flower and ladies market, and if you want a bit of adventure, you can do Hong Kong Disney. And also I want to talk about Singapore as well, because an amazing port that I've been to a couple of times. There's so much to see there. So obviously the gardens by the bay, which you can see from the ship, but we also recommend you go there at night to see the light show, the iconic Marina Bay Sands Hotel, which almost backdrops behind the ship, so you can see the gardens and that famous hotel that has the 3 columns, and then almost like that boat shaped roof that has the iconic swim up bar, and you can have a Singapore sling, or you could treat yourself and go to Raffles.
Yeah.
So much to see and do.
Yeah, and isn't this incredible? These are just some really great recommendations that you can tell your customers and get them dreaming, get them picturing everything that is on our world cruises. And for us, Richard's touched on some of the shore experiences that we have. I love a shore experience because it really does give me the opportunity to tell a story. And I think that's what we're doing. We're not selling holidays, we're selling dreams, aren't we? And these world cruises are things that people dream of. Now, any particular shore experiences that you can recommend before we show a lovely video of our top 5? So
one, just talking about shore experiences, a lot of people say, should we book before, should we book on board? I always say book when it's right for you.
Yeah.
If you want to book before, to make sure that you've guaranteed you've got that space, if it's like a once in a lifetime port that you've never been to, or if you're happy to book on board and see almost like what is remaining that you haven't done before, we always recommend you booking the tours through P&O Cruises, especially with some of the ports being, where we dock on some of the wild cruises. It might not be immediately where the local entertainment or activities or icons are to see.
Yes.
It might be a bit of an industrial port, so you have to get a guided tour or one of the shuttle buses. So we always recommend you booking the shore experiences, and also the ship will never leave you behind because you're with us, you're part of our tour, so we always have to obviously stick by the times, but we would never leave a guest behind. But yeah, just one tour that I just want to talk to, and obviously we do go there on the Wild Cruise in Honolulu. I actually went last year to Pearl Harbor, and it was one tour that we do through the ship, and it was one place I'd never been to, and I also wanted to go and just see Pearl Harbor and pay, my respect to what had happened.
Yeah.
I got to visit the USS Arizona Memorial and just experience some of that history in that part of the US that we're all familiar with. But I think it's these ports of call on the Wild Cruise where you get to really explore some iconic places, but also moments in history that you maybe never have dreamed of seeing or going to, and that was also organised through the ship, and it took us on a journey through history and a moving day, a place to reflect, but also a place to explore in that destination.
Yeah, and you're right, because shore experiences can make you bring a destination to life, but whether you want to go and have that historical interest, you want to go and experience the local culture and sample that local food and drink, or you want to go and have a beach break, you could do all of that on these world cruises, and you holiday your own way. We say about holiday like never before, and you choose how you holiday like never before. So let's look at some incredible shore experiences that can bring these destinations to life. Who's excited to sell the world cruise? I certainly am. So before we move on, Richard, how do we keep these destinations alive once our guests get back on board our beautiful Arcadia?
Yeah, so a lot of people ask me this, and we break it up. So the grand tours and the world cruises, we do break it up to the destinations we go to, and we really try and bring it to life on board. So whether that's through the entertainment, or whether that's through the food or the wine pairings, the F&B or the food and beverage team spend a lot of time, a year before, really planning the menus, any specialty dinings, barbecues on deck to really bring, the flavors, for the food and the drinks pairings to life on board, and also the entertainment as well. So we're very fortunate with going around the world that we have these amazing like local shows coming on board. Even just thinking back to the World Cruise this year. So when they were in Mexico, a mariachi band came on board and local dancers came on board to really put together this very immersive show in the Palladium Theatre just before the ship set sail. So the majority of the guests were back on board by that point. Their tours had finished, so they put on this big show in the theatre on board for the guests to really continue that immersiveness of being in that port. And then obviously those local dancers did disembark, and then the ship set sails for its next destination. But the ships are so amazing at bringing to life the culture, the cuisines, and the flavors of where you go on board. And if that's through the food or the entertainment, you definitely feel immersed. And I think just touching on some of the other amazing moments on board those cruises, when you set sail, a lot of the local villages or towns or people that live in that destination do come and wave the ship off.
Yeah.
And you referenced going to Manila in 27. I remember being on board Manila last year. And there was thousands of people watching us sail, because a lot of our crew are Filipino.
Yeah.
So a lot of their friends and family came to see them for the day, because it's very rare they sail into their home port of call. For us, we sail into Southampton, every cruise, but for them, they were sailing home. And the quayside was lined with thousands of family and friends to give us a welcome, but also to send us on our way to the next iconic port. So there's always something to see and do.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we don't leave our destinations behind. So why do our guests choose to do this cruise? And, why would you not when you're going to go to 29 different destinations in one holiday? They unpack once, as Richard said, take as much luggage as you want, as long as you can fill it in your room. Some do it as a lifestyle choice. Some do this year in, year out. That is how they escape the winter. But others do this as that once in a lifetime. And you always hear people say, what are you going to do if you win the lottery or you come into some money? I'm going to go on a world cruise. But, once the festivities of Christmas are over, the real winter begins, and our guests ultimately go in search of adventures, sunshine, and experiences in iconic ports. Now, we know that we looked at the shore experiences. They might choose to go and do things like snorkeling in the Whitsundays, or go and just sample some beautiful Sauvignon Blanc in New Zealand. However, our guests choose to tick off their bucket list, they can do it, but I think they might need a bigger bucket list than they have currently got written down. But guests choose this because of the value for money. So I always say to any travel agent, if you are looking at a world cruise, do break it down per person per night, because it works out incredible value. Guests are going to be off exploring these ports by day, and then they get back on board and have all of their home comforts. They'll enjoy the foodie delights and the entertainment that's on offer. So really do think about the value that these world cruises represent, how many places you can get to. If you were to do that as just city breaks, cost you a lot more than our world cruise would cost. Other reasons guests choose this type of cruise is that they know they're going to get exceptional service with P&O Cruises. Great service does come as standard, and they just ultimately want to visit ports in a way that they never thought possible, and they can do it in such an effortless way. Imagine how Richard just said, you leave Southampton and then a few weeks later you're in Sydney, you're on the other side of the world, but it's been an effortless journey. Our average age of a world cruiser is around 68. The majority of these guests are past guests, so a bit of an opportunity to attract some people that are perhaps new to cruise. And over 2/3 of our guests travel as a couple, but it is that bonding experience that we can give our guests on board. But ultimately, their top 5 wants, why people want to go on this cruise, is because they want to explore somewhere new, have an adventure they'll never forget, to see amazing things, to have no stress about anything, and to have fun. And then the other thing they love is that balance between sea days and port days. And I think that's really important, isn't it? Why is that balance so important?
I think people, always ask me this, why do we need the sea days? But actually, when you're in these ports of call, especially like those overnight ports, or if you're on a 12-hour tour, for example, you do need that balance of the port days, which can be very busy,
Yeah.
paired with those relaxing days at sea. So you do need them to almost like recharge, but also reflect on where you've been and also what's ahead, because every day you're going further to somewhere else. And there's so much to do on board on those sea days. You can do as much or as little as you like. And that's, I think, one of the other benefits of cruising. You can do as much as you want, or you can do as little as you want. So if you want to relax, sunbathe, read a nice book, the library on board, journal, scrapbook. A lot of these guests bring a lot of crafts with them.
Yes.
You can do a little, or you can do a lot. So take advantage of the whole host of activities that we have. So those guest speakers, for example, we have a full program of sporting events, quizzes, the Creative Waves program where you can craft and learn to paint, or make things that are relatable to where you're going. Souvenirs for back home. We have the sail away parties, the deck barbecues. We have the open deck, experiences, coffee mornings. There's always something to do. Or you might just want to relax and watch the world go by.
Literally watch the world go by.
I've, made a lot of friends with the guests that have got a very busy social life on board, because they're seeing that friend for a coffee. They've got a creative wave class. They're going to have a nice light lunch because they've got then a sporting activity in the evening. And then all the guests say, I might have a night off. I might, not go out for, but they do.
They go out for dinner every night.
But
you're not cooking for 3 months.
We say the same
totally
with the crew member. I might have a night off. No, you don't.
No, you don't.
do still get dressed up and you do go out, because it's so part of that experience.
Yeah.
You're immersed in this bubble, sailing the world with these people. You just don't want to miss out.
No, and I just think you need to relax, recharge, and you would sit there and just think, I can't believe I've been so lucky to go to that place and plan what you're going to do in the next destination. So absolutely incredible. Now, also with the World Cruise, it's really important for you travel agents to understand that you can actually break the World Cruise down into Southern Hemisphere journeys, as we call them, which is essentially a half world cruise. So you might sail to Australia and New Zealand and fly back, or vice versa. And these Southern Hemisphere journeys can range from about 39 nights to 63 nights, depending on which part of the leg you go to first. Now, our guests can also do exotic fly cruises, where this is what you would call sectors. So you can break that world cruise up. You might fly to Cape Town and sail to Sydney, or you might fly to Sydney and sail to San Francisco. So we can tailor that for you. Now, all of our fly cruise holidays do include our economy class flights to and from London. Upgrades and regional airports are available for a supplement and subject to availability. And we use a really wide range of airlines, from British Airways to Etihad and Qatar Airways. But we always include the coach transfers from the overseas airport to the ship on embarkation and disembarkation dates. And if there's an overnight stay, a forced overnight stay, we'll of course provide that hotel accommodation. So we always say at P&O Cruises, we make it so nice and easy. It could not be easier for you to explore further afield. Plus, you can deviate your flights to explore destinations independently, either before flying home or joining the ship. So our guests can make the most of that local scene in just what is then going to be an incredible holiday. So Asia, Australasia, the Middle East, or Central America, it can all be visited. So before we move on to our grand tours, what is your top tip for selling a full world cruise?
You have already touched on it, Steph.
Sorry, you're on the same page.
Yeah, we are. We're always on the same page. It is the price.
Yeah, value.
The value. When you break it down, I just pulled some prices from Polar today. So if you look at a sea view on the World Cruise in 26, based on 2 people sharing, £14,569 per person. If you break that down, it's just over £140 per person per day. And that does include all of your travel,
yeah,
exploring the world, all of your first class entertainment and service, your accommodation, and all of your food. And we've spoken about this before, haven't we? You can't book a hotel in London,
No,
3 meals a day, a West End show for less than £140.
absolutely not.
And also the places that you go to on that amount of money, you can't fly to all those 29 destinations. You wouldn't be able to do it.
No.
So the value for money, and we say this when we sell on board, is the first thing that we would say. And that paired with, it's an iconic cruise going around the world. Just looking at 27 for the 106 nights. Again, this is an inside based on 2 sharing, £15,229 per person. So again, just over about £140 per person per day. The value for money is incredible.
It is, and it is incredible value. And that is my top tip as well. That is exactly what I would say. Break it down and get their customers to close their eyes and do what we just did and talk that full itinerary. Get them to imagine them having those experiences. So who's ready to go on a world cruise? Let me see some of those reactions. Now, we are going to move on to our grand tours, because if guests perhaps don't have 100 or 106 nights, then we've got our grand tours, which are on our other exclusively for adult ship, which is Aurora. Now, these grand tours for 26 and 27 are 75 nights, but unlike the world cruises, they cannot be broken down into sectors. They're sold as full cruises. Now, I first met you on Aurora, but before we look at the itinerary, you've lived on Aurora.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about her and why she's perfect.
Yeah, I've lived on Aurora for 2 years and got to do her iconic 2023 Grand Tour, which was amazing. And we're going to talk about it. It goes around the Cape Horn and does South America. Aurora is our smallest, as you said, adult only. It's our intimate classic.
Yeah.
She's classic style of cruising, very traditional, but with modern twists. She's very intimate. Again, that one crew member to every 2 guests. So very personable, that ratio of guests to crew. So you do feel like a family. As you've got there, that gorgeous tiered back deck.
Yes.
Perfect for lazy sea days, sailing by with the pools, the jacuzzis, the indoor pool in case the weather does change. And I know we're going to touch on the South America cruise, but when you're sailing from the sun to some of those really southern parts, of South America, you do need that inside pool because the weather can change. So she's perfect for, again, the ports of call that we go to. She's not too big that she can go through, again, the Panama Canal, sailing to these iconic destinations. You feel very close with the crew in terms of that family element. You all become, one family sailing, the world. Again, stunning atrium, stunning internal spaces, the bars, the restaurants, specialty dining, her library at sea, and her lovely West End style theatre where you see a show every night.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the suites, which we've got pictured there. So, you're going to go around the world, you're going to live in these beautiful penthouse suites.
Yeah, so that's the library penthouse.
Oh.
Yes, you can see the little library by the balcony. Yes, stunning. Two floors. And we've also then got the piano suite on the other side of the ship. So if your guests want to go in true style, get them to book the penthouse.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get looking at these incredible itineraries. Now in 2026, you can see quite how port rich this itinerary is. So Aurora will leave Southampton on the 3rd of January. And then she departs on what is, quite frankly, an epic South America journey. So she actually visits 24 ports across those 75 nights. You get 2 full days in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, Montevideo in Uruguay, San Antonio for tours to Santiago in Chile, and Callao for tours to Lima in Peru. Now, Aurora will also call, as you can see on here, the Port Stanley in the Falkland Islands and cruising around Cape Horn and through the Magellan Straits. She will sail past that iconic Malia Glacier, which I'm sure you've done, and then transits the Panama Canal too, with then the opportunity to island hop around 6 different Caribbean islands, including Aruba, Grenada, Antigua, and St. Lucia. So if This sounds incredible to me. I think this is probably your favourite Grand Tour.
Yes.
And, you know, if they want to be intrigued by fascinating cities and then get the natural wonders of South America, well, this may well be the cruise for them.
It is, you're right, fascinating cities and that ever-changing landscape.
Yes.
So I've actually done this itinerary in 23 and it's a very popular one for our guests and the crew because we seem to be doing South America every 3 years.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that everyone gets their chance to book on it and experience, because you might not necessarily fly to all these countries or these places for, say, a 2-week holiday, but over those 75 nights, you are exploring South America.
I know, how incredible. The flavours, the sounds.
The sounds, the spices, the movements, the foods.
I know, it makes me do that already.
It's interesting because you sail over to Brazil first and you do, you know, you're on the beach, Copacabana Beach, seeing Christ the Redeemer in all of its glory, overlooking Rio, in the sunshine, that heat of Brazil. And then before you know it, you're sailing down to Cape Horn where the dramatic landscape changes.
Yes.
And you're, you know, it can be cold because obviously you're near, you know, more of the southern parts of the world. And the dramatic landscape does change and you see those sail-bys and those glaciers. So from one minute you're on the beach of Rio to sailing past glaciers, you know, it's just a diverse mix of itinerary to see. One highlight port definitely I'll have to just touch on is Port Stanley for the Falkland Islands. I remember when we were doing it in 2023, it was one of those ports of call that is, you know, it holds a lot of, you know, special memories for people. It's very personable for a lot of people, especially our age profile on board, that, you know, booked that cruise especially to go to the Falklands again. Maybe they served there or had a connection through family or friends in the past, but it was definitely a very special place for us to go. And I remember we tender in that port and we were waiting for the captain to give us the go-ahead to get the first tender, you know, on its way. And I remember when the captain did and he said, yeah, we're all ready to go. And it was just this wave of excitement for people to go to such a special place that they might not never get to go to again. An interesting fact, bar 100 people, everyone was ashore.
Really?
Guided tours, there for their own personal reasons, going to the famous beaches to see the penguins, or having, you know, a drink in one of the, you know, southernly most parts of the world in one of the pubs.
How cool.
So yeah, an iconic itinerary from start to finish.
Yeah, I love that. So then let's look at the difference between the 2026 and 2027 Grand Tour. And again, it's why customers can maybe come back time and time again, because you're going to see different itineraries. And this one is incredibly port rich. So again, leaving on the 3rd of January 2027, Aurora actually then now departs on America and her Caribbean Discovery Grand Tour. This is 34 unique ports in 75 nights. So incredible, as you can see from the map here. Now here, guests are going to visit Puerto Limon in Costa Rica, Roatan in Honduras, Costa Maya in Mexico too. We've got a maiden call at Galveston in Texas before heading to New Orleans, where guests get 2 full days to explore, you know, a really melting pot of different cultures that is New Orleans. And then she heads to the US for Miami and Port Canaveral. Now, there's plenty to explore, as you can see there, for the Caribbean islands, because we'll go to lesser frequented ports like Trinidad and Tobago and Grand Turk, plus the Bahamas and the Dominican Republic. And then, of course, we've got some popular favourites in there as well, with Antigua, Barbados and St. Lucia. So whether our guests want a city break, a beach break or a nature adventure, this is also an incredible holiday. 34 ports in 75 nights is quite phenomenal, isn't it? But is there any ports on there that stand out to you?
Well, just looking at that photo, so I was actually in Antigua on Arvia at Christmas and we went to the pig beach where you get to see,
I had to put that in for you.
Yeah, where you get to see all the pigs in their natural habitat. They all live there. They're looked after. They're cared for. It is a bit of a tourist, you know, experience, but they are very well looked after and cared for.
good.
They're saved, you know, from across the islands of the Caribbean, and they live on this beach wildly. And you get to go and see them and feed them and have your photo with them. So that just sparked a memory of me and my family doing it at Christmas. But also, I love Mexico.
Yeah.
Love the food, you know, love the flavors, you know, the vibrancy of all of Mexico and all the ports that we go to. So I just want to touch on Cozumel, which is one of my favorite destinations, and we do go there because Cozumel is one of the islands off Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, and it is very hearty and lively Latin vibe. But one of the best-selling tours that we do, and I've actually done this one, is a shore experience to one of the seven wonders of the world, the famous ruins of the Chichen Itza. And you spend an intriguing day at this, you know, this Mayan temple in the Mexican jungle. So it's iconic and unforgettable. This ruined Mayan metropolis will transport you to a different world. You can marvel at the feats of the architecture from the past. And your guide will always bring to life, you know, what happened, how it was built, when it was built, your 365 steps to the top, which represent one for every day of the year. All of this science behind what they built so long ago in the middle of the Mexican jungle. You can gaze up and look at the mighty temples of the warriors, where these stone columns stands like, you know, soldiers. It's definitely a trip not to be missed, and one that I would definitely highlight for any of the guests booking, and a moment or a day to remember in the middle of the Mexican jungle.
How cool. Chichen Itza.
Chichen Itza.
The Chichen Itza.
Chichen Itza.
I'll leave you to that.
Yes.
Who wants to go on a grand tour? I hope many of you do. Now, look, the average age of a guest going on our grand tour is 71, so slightly older than the World Cruise. And again, past guests come back time and time again to enjoy these cruises. So you really do need to think about this, particularly when we go into launches, because we know our guests book these time and time again. But the major factors for, again, guests booking these grand tours is visiting somewhere they've never been before, and with that ease of Southampton. So any final thoughts on grand tours before we race through just some other itineraries that guests can go on for slightly less time, but still a longer duration cruise?
I think, like you say, like we offer those 106 night cruises or those 75 night grand tours. And I think you go, again, setting sail from Southampton, that firework, you know, send off. Like, unlike the World Cruise, you're on board those 75 nights collectively. So there's no guests getting on and off. It's one cruise, and we sell that as one cruise, as opposed to the sectors for the World Cruise. You unpack once. Yes, there's time changes and time zone changes, but you don't feel it. You just go to bed and you wake up and you're on the other side of the world. Or in this case that we've just spoken about, you know, going around Cape Horn and South America. The dining, the entertainment, the shore experiences, why wouldn't you want to do it?
Yeah, I can't think of any reasons, and I really need to go and see if I can get annual leave
Come
to
on
join
with me,
you.
but yeah.
How can I swing this as research? I think I need to do it. So do you all agree with me? Yes, I hope you do. So let's just touch upon some other long duration cruises. And what do I mean by long duration cruises? Well, maybe not as long as the World Cruise or the Grand Tour, but we have cruises that are anything from 16 nights to 35 nights. They're not that typical 14-night holiday. Anything over 16 nights for us, we class as a longer duration. And I love these cruises because they can make our guests explore a bit further. But one other thing to think about with our pricing structure is that the majority of the guests that book on these cruises that are longer is that they will always book the select fare, the most of the time the select fare, because they're picking their cabin that they're going to stay in for a long duration. They want to guarantee their dining times, and then of course they can get some onboard spending money as well, so they can really treat themselves to a cocktail of the day or a shore experience to bring the destination to life. So when you are advertising these particular cruises, do think about that select price, because our guests, again, goes back to the value, see the value of that. So where can our guests go on a longer duration cruise from 16 to 35 nights? Well, they can actually go over to Canada and the USA. Now, Canada in the fall is the best time to go, I'm told. So in 25, 26 and 27, we've got 24-night options or 30-night options over to that part of the world on Arcadia and Aurora. Depending on the itinerary, we've got overnight stays in Boston, New York, and Quebec. And, you know, what a brilliant way to have some excellent cities. Escape over to the Atlantic from Southampton and go and explore Canada and the US.
And I've done that one and it's amazing. And fall at Canada, you know, Canada in fall is amazing. Guests can also visit Spain, Portugal, and the Canary Islands for longer too. Plus, we can combine with Morocco and Cape Verde too, with holidays both in 2026 and in 2027.
Yeah, and we know Cape Verde is really hot at the moment, so great to check out those itineraries. If guests want to immerse themselves in the Mediterranean, then we've got loads of options actually from 19, 21, and 24 nights. And that's on Arcadia, Aurora, Britannia, and Ventura. So if you have a look at the longer duration cruises on those, being on board, we know means that guests can explore further. So guests can get to iconic places in the Med, Istanbul, Limassol, Bodrum. Plus a new port for us is Sarand in Albania, which again is very hot. But something I'm doing this summer is exploring the Croatian coast. And to be able to sail from Southampton, you of course need a bit longer. So Dubrovnik, Split and Zadar, plus Tangier and Casablanca in Morocco, Ephesus and La Goulette in Tunisia. Plus we've even got a cruise to Alexandria in Egypt, where guests can go and again explore a wonder of the world, the pyramids of Giza. So these are the cruises where, you know, we can really showcase how we've got the world covered.
I want to just touch on one of my favourite cruises, so Scandinavia and Northern Europe. So Aurora and Arcadia offer cruises of 16 nights where guests will explore iconic cities like Copenhagen, Skagen and Aarhus in Denmark, Riga in Latvia, Stockholm in Sweden, and Warnemünde in Germany, just to name a few. It's an amazing cruise to go to those Scandinavian and Northern Europe cities.
Yeah.
It's definitely one that I would 100% recommend to guests, because you get to see so many places that you may, again, not necessarily book a 2-week holiday there, but you can see so many different countries in, you know, those 16 nights.
Yeah, Copenhagen, I went in April and what an incredible city. So I think there's even some overnight stays as well in Copenhagen and some of those cities. So check those out. Now we've also got Norway and Iceland, of course. Who doesn't want to go in search of the Northern Lights? And we've got 16 nights on Arcadia. We've got overnight stays in Reykjavik, and you know, opportunities to visit Akureyri and Isafjordur as well. And you can see that beautiful image there. I love Norway, but going a bit further for a bit longer means you can explore Iceland too.
And then I just want to touch on the British Isles. So actually, Britannia is on her 10th anniversary cruise, sailing the British Isles at the moment, celebrating her 10th birthday. But we also, you know, a lot of people also want to stay a little bit closer to home sometimes. Yeah. So we can explore the British Isles on 14 and 16 night cruises. Across on Arcadia and on Aurora. So destinations like Cobb for Cork, Holyhead, Liverpool, Belfast, Kirkwall, Stornoway, Lerwick and Newcastle, to name a few. And I think sometimes we don't spend as much time exploring our own country, but there's so much to see. And we know that the Britannia team and the guests on board are having a fantastic time sailing the British Isles now. So definitely one to speak with your guests about, exploring maybe somewhere a little bit closer to home and our own country.
I know. I wonder if we tested Richard on his UK knowledge,
oh, no,
if it would be so good as his knowledge of around the world. Should we try it?
I have no idea where some of these places in our own country are, but again, you know, great for us to explore as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then lastly, of course, we've got our incredible Caribbean fly cruises. But if guests do want to sail there, reach the Caribbean relaxed, they can do so on 24 night and 35 night options on Iona, Aurora and Ventura. So there's lots of dates throughout the winter. They can take advantage of all those sea days crossing the Atlantic with all of our incredible facilities on board. So, have we done it? Have we nearly took you round the world in 60 minutes? I think we have. And look, I really hope as we come towards the end of this webinar that you can see just how magical and iconic our world cruises and grand tours are. You can just imagine exploring up to 34 ports in one holiday and unpacking once, ticking off those bucket list experiences, and just having the greatest travel ambitions that can be fulfilled with going on a P&O Cruises holiday. We see so many of our guests traveling on these that are past guests because they believe in our brand and they know what P&O Cruises offers. Great service as standard, incredible value for money. And this is a real opportunity for you to really bring these world cruises to life. It is about that value, breaking down per person per night, thinking about being able to do these holidays in one. Can you beat a land-based? Can you beat this price, this value, these destinations on a land-based holiday? I'm not sure you could. So thank you so much for your input today. Before we look at the quiz questions, Richard, any final thoughts for our lovely travel agents who have given up an hour of their time? Thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed it. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, just thank you for joining us. I hope that we've, shared as much as we can with the experience that I've had on board working and sailing and selling these cruises. And I think, don't be scared to, approach the guests with these 75 nights, 106 night Grand Tours World Cruises, or the short to long durations that we also offer, because they are once in a lifetime, or for some, an every year holiday. Why wouldn't you want to do these cruises? Why wouldn't you want to tick off these most amazing bucket list destination, ports of call, places and experiences that you can have around the world in style, but also that value for money element that you've touched on. So I hope that we've shared as much as we can about these iconic destinations around the world in 60 minutes.
Yeah, hasn't he been an incredible guest? And I am going to miss my sidekick when he goes back to sea. So thank you ever so much. I have just in the chat, if you wouldn't mind giving us 2 more minutes of your time, there's a Microsoft form in there. If you would be able to give us some feedback so we can make sure any of our webinars in future are as beneficial as possible. But shall we see how you did on the quiz, shall we? Shall we see how you did on the polls and see what your answers were? So let's test Richard, shall we? So which ship offers the full world cruise?
Arcadia.
Arcadia. Our 2026 world cruise is how many nights long?
100.
It is.
So I'll be on it.
Is he showing off now? On the 2027 world cruise, where do we stay overnight?
Both, isn't it? Oh yeah, I can see, right, yeah. So Cape Town, Sydney, San Francisco, Hong Kong.
Yeah, Port Elizabeth, Singapore.
There you go.
Not Vanuatu. How old is the average age of our world cruises?
68 young.
68 young, yeah, we don't need to use that word old. What do our guests want from their world cruise experience?
All of that. To have fun, to see amazing things, no stress, adventures they won't forget, and explore somewhere new.
Yeah, our grand tours can be broken down into shorter sectors, true or false? False.
Complete cruise sold as one.
Which grand tour offers 34 unique ports?
2027.
Yeah, and long duration cruises are typically for how long?
Over 16 nights.
Yeah, over 16 nights and up to 35 nights. So that is everything from us. If you do want that video, I did see a question in the chat. You can see that on the P&O Cruises YouTube channel, or you can get onto P&O Cruises Asset Bank if you do need some marketing material to be able to promote these cruises. We will send the survey round, and I will also be allocated some lovely shine points for those of you who have took part. I really do hope you've enjoyed talking or listening to us talk about World Cruise quite how much I have. So we're going to love you and leave you on quite a rainy day in Southampton, dreaming of a world cruise. So thank you ever so much for joining us. You take care of yourselves, and do come along to our webinars in the future. We hope to see you then. Take care now. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.